we go. Thank you for the reminder, Dev. Inform, inspire, and empower people to rise up in the name of love and equality, as I mentioned. And we do it through many different ways. We do it through our biggest event is Racial Healing in America Conference. We do it through organizing protests. We were very active for about a year and a half in seeking social justice for Stephon Clark. And we've, over the years, narrowed our focus down to racial healing and social justice because the first year following our inception in 2016, we were all over the place fighting for every single cause. It was a whole lot for us. But part of the reason why we're doing the Protect Your Vote, and we've always been active in ensuring people get to vote, featuring candidates that are either people of color or people that we know their voice is really necessary. We believe that in hitting critical mass of representation in our country, we will in fact change the way it is at this time, where not everybody has equal rights, and our goal is to really achieve a world that works for everyone. So we have some, our team here, I just want to kind of go quickly through them. We've got Kathy Ballantyne, say hi. She's been on the leadership team since 2016. Our newest member, Janelle, say hi. She's been with us recently. Deb, my right hand over there. Yeah, there you go. Been doing amazing work with us since inception. Tamara Lacey, say hello. These are the powerful folks. And there's a few more that can't join us tonight, but we're small and mighty. And so the reason we had this event, Protect Your Vote, we do believe that right now there's a lot of things going on to suppress voters and lots of shenanigans, if you will. And one of the things that I think that will get in people's way of voting is not being informed. And so in our effort to ensure that everybody gets the opportunity to vote and understands the process, we have an amazing person here tonight, speaker. I want to introduce him formally, and then I'll just say how amazing he is as a friend. So let me just start by saying we have Jesse Salinas. He is the assessor, clerk recorder, and registrar of voters for Yolo County. He has enjoyed an exceptional career as a research analyst, prior to this as a research analyst for the California School Boards Association. He was the senior consultant on kindergarten through higher education at the request of the California State Senate's president pro tem. He was an executive director for a nonprofit for several years, but his love for public policy brought him back. And he was a principal management analyst in Yolo County's administrator's office, as well as the Department of Financial Services. And there's so much more I could say about him, lots of kudos and amazing work that he's been doing in our community and all over the region. But I know that he would love us to know that he's been married to his high school sweetheart for 35 years, Lisa. She's also amazing. And he has 3 wonderful adult children. I've gotten to know him over the last year in our program, the American Leadership Forum, and just true blue, an amazing person inside and out, and truly cares about the world we live in. And so when he offered to give us this overview, I was absolutely a yes. So without further ado, I would like to pass it over to Jesse. Let's give him a round of applause.
Hi, Anita. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I see we have a couple of other new additions that are joining in. So thank you and welcome to tonight's talk. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you not only what's happening in elections, but I thought I'd take this opportunity to highlight some things that I think people have lost track of with the pandemic, but important issues related to women's rights to voting and so forth that has kind of been lost with everything taking place with COVID. So with that, again, yes, I am Jesse Salinas, the county assessor, clerk, recorder, and register of voters. So if there's a possibility to give me access and sharing the screen, I don't know if that's something you're able to do.
You should be able to do it. Can you try it?
Okay, I just opened it up and maybe it didn't, hold on, let me go through that real quick. Let me hit the share button. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
You can all see that, right?
Gotta love it
Yep.
when technology cooperates.
And open it up fully so you can see it all. All right. So hopefully you can all see that clearly. Does that work for everybody?
Yep.
Looks
All
great.
right,
Thank you.
great. So to give you a quick overview of the presentation, I want to talk about women voters past and present and share with you, just to give you also a feel of the complexities of administration, because there's a lot of changes that I'm going to talk to you about that's taking place. But I also want to give you a feel of what happens behind the curtain, so to speak, of the elections world, just to give you a quick sense of that. And then to talk about not only the impact of COVID in the primary elections, but in the coming fall, what that means and why we're going to see the changes we are going to see, the major changes in November. I'd like to also tell you what to expect in the Sacramento region, because not everybody's going to be doing the same thing, but I'll give you a listing of who's doing what, and you'll get a better sense of it throughout the Sacramento region, the greater Sacramento region. And then lastly is to give you some insights of how to get involved and stay informed moving forward. So quick overview of what we're going to talk about. And if you have questions, I am setting time aside at the end. Just write down your questions. I'll try and answer every one of them. And since it's a small group, if along the way there are questions, feel free to let me know, and I can stop the flow. But if we're able to wait till the end, then I think that'll go a little quicker in terms of the presentation. But if there's a must need to ask a question, feel free to do so. Okay. All
Sounds
right.
good.
All right. So just, I think people have lost track of the fact that this is a 100-year anniversary of the women's suffrage movement. I mean, you think about it, the passage of the 19th Amendment, it actually passed August of 1920. And we've completely lost track because this world that we're in now, COVID, it's easy to lose track of something so pivotal as that, to think that before then women weren't even allowed to vote. It's kind of mind-boggling now when we think about it from that context, but something to kind of share with you. I want to talk about why that's been so important. And this is some information I wanted to share with you. So since the 20th century, women have constituted the majority of those people voting public, of the voting public. That means the number of female voters has exceeded male voters in every presidential since 1964. And then since 1980, the percentage of female voters has exceeded that of male voters. So what does that mean? Women vote. They vote. They vote at a higher rate than men. I wanted to share with you, this is a graphical representation, again, since 1980. Look at that. The women are registered at a higher rate, and they turn out and vote at a higher rate. And that's reflected from 1980 through 2016. So important change that happened when women got the important um, opportunity to start voting. And this gives you a little bit of interesting data points that shares with you when you compare women to men and you look at them from age 18 through 64, you'll see the consistent pattern where women outvote men in all age groups through age 64. And that's what it shows you is that now what the other piece, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later, is but there is a significant lower threshold or turnout for younger people. Take a look at what's the women that are 18 to 24. That's that green, that lower green one. Look at how that compares with even the next level up. There's quite a jump when you get to 25 to 55, but the young voters are just not participating at the rate they should be historically. And that's actually a 20-year snapshot that you're seeing there. So one of the reasons my office has been very engaged in trying to engage and get young people to vote. So this is a kind of an interesting little graph because it shows that women, once they get past 64 and they're in the 65 to 75 and older, this is that 65 plus, it actually is a little different. The data points show a little differently. Yes, actually women 75 and older actually vote less. Not sure why that is. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon. They don't vote as much when they get much older than that 75 and older. But I want to give you a quick snapshot. So when people talk about elections, and I have to confess, I'm one of the ones that didn't truly understand how complex elections were until I started working in the field. And I've been in this office now for 4 years. So it gives you a snapshot of my experience having worked in the county administrator's office. I oversaw a number of departments, and I only at a distance worked with the elections office. But the complexity of what takes place in the elections world is significant. So this wheel that you see here gives you an overview of the pieces that we have to do. So the burgundy color shows you our ongoing work. Of course, we have to track the election law, which is constantly changing. And a lot of the things that we're going to talk about later is because of changes in election law, significant changes. But you can see there's all these technology changes that are taking place, lots of changes happening related to that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And there's also the election preparation. And that's that kind of greenish, yellowish kind of color that you see that's down below. And it really shows you this is what the steps that we have to think about when we start talking about preparing for the elections. It's not just getting people registered to vote. We've got to track where they live. We've got to create maps and databases that align with where they live, because their ballot has to reflect their registration area. If they're military or overseas voters, we have to be able to deal with that. And of course, candidates and campaign financing pieces, our office collects. So all that paperwork we're processing. And then just getting ready for all the polling places. I mean, we have to be able to identify those polling places. And I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. But part of the identifying that is making sure that they're ADA accessible. And you can see that as the ongoing, are they ADA accessible? Can they really be accessible to the community as a whole? And are they located in good locations throughout the community? And on top of it, with more recent matters, we have to be able to assume that they're safe of potential wildfires and power outages. So we are having to consider those pieces that you think, oh, you shouldn't have to worry about that. No, we do. We have to worry about all those pieces when we identify a location and have backup plans if something goes wrong in those areas. And then, of course, there is advanced voting, and we'll chat a little bit more about that, what that means and why that looks so differently. And then in the day of the election, we have to be able to tabulate these votes. We got to make sure, and quite frankly, this doesn't even talk about training the poll workers and how they interface with the community. Huge issue, right? Because you can disenfranchise people if you don't properly greet them and help them in terms of their actual voting experience. So we have to train them. We have to actually do the tabulation of the votes. We have to process them. And then afterwards, there's something called canvassing. And what that is on election day, and this gives you a little bit more behind the scenes of what takes place. So you probably noticed that on election day, right around 8:15 or so, a little after 8 o'clock, there's these huge results that come out. And then there's like quiet. There's a silence for hours, right? And then maybe another result. Well, the reason is that first 8:15, 8:20 results are based on vote by mails that have come into our system. And we've actually been able to process them if they've come in before election day. Doesn't mean we tally them. That's why it says voting and tabulation. I cannot, by law, tabulate them until after 8 o'clock. So even if I have 30,000 vote by mails that have come in, I can process them, which means, and I'll go a little bit more about the details, but we'll process them, but I cannot scan them I can scan them, but I cannot finally tabulate them, which is this other system that is where I flip the switch and I actually start to get the results of those elections. So that's, and I'll walk you through some of that so you have confidence to know these are how our election processes are built and to know there's confidence in that. But that's all on election day. Take a look at the canvassing. That's after elections. And after elections, that means anything that is being processed, all the vote by mails that are dropped off on election day, we have to still do our processing and vetting through that. And to give you a sense of how much things have changed, in the last March primary election, 1/3 of the vote by mails were dropped off on election day at our polling places. So I have to go through the process of not only doing those vote by mails, but all the provisionals and conditional votes and processing those. And those have to actually be processed as part of the canvassing. And technically, we have 30 days after the election day to finish certifying. And that canvassing is that process where we're vetting through all of these documents. And to give you a sense of some of the changes, and they are significant, if a envelope is postmarked on election day and arrives to our office up to 3 days later, we have to process it. There is legislation in the pipeline that wants to move that out to 17 days later. And the reason is they're concerned that there's so much movement towards vote by mail that us registrars and the United States Postal Service is going to need that extra time to make sure all the ballots get to us and that we can count them. So steps that are being taken at the state level to make sure people's votes are counted and are included if they're eligible. But there's pieces that even happen with that I'll talk about a little bit more on the vote by mail process. But that's called the canvassing, and it can take up to 30 days. Typically in Yolo County, we'll take 2 to 3 weeks to do that. And so that's our typical timing, but there's always auditing. Just so you know, I constantly have the grand jury at inspecting everything I do. We have regular reports from them, making sure that they're holding me accountable, which of course I'm very transparent. But yes, Deb, you have a question.
Yeah, I do. So I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. When you're talking about the 17 days after, can you repeat that part? Did you say that it would be accepted 17 days if it was postmarked 17 days after
No,
election day?
no, it's got to be postmarked on election day.
Okay.
But if the transport is coming out, just so you know, that hasn't happened yet. That's part of legislation
Right.
in the pipeline. Right now, it's a 3-day window. And to
3
give
days.
you context as part of the canvassing, you can go to any polling place in California. If you have a vote by mail, you can drop it into any polling place, and we as registrars will collect it. We will have to sift through that in the canvassing and say, oh, this is Sacramento's ballot, this is Los Angeles's ballot, and we have to, within a 7-day window, get it shipped out to that county. So
Okay.
to give you a context, in Yolo County in March, we had over 40 different counties dropped off at our different polling places. And that's not unusual because we have UC Davis here. And so you have a lot of students that may be voting where they grew up, but they drop it off here at our polling place. But we still have to get it there. But that's the window that also extends why we can't get a final certification, because that canvassing period and these rules are in place. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So as you're talking to people, this is why I'm giving you an in-depth, like I said, behind the curtain, what you're seeing, and you can inform people. No, there are processes in place, and there's a reason why you often don't have final election results just on election day, because there's these rules in place that registrars have to follow. Make sense? All right, so let's continue. So I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about what took place and why some of these changes are now that we're facing in November are here before us. And it's really the impact of the pandemic. So to give you a quick snapshot, so remember, the primary election happened on March 3rd. And we were just getting wind of this thing called COVID. It really hadn't broken yet, right? It's like there's this potential pandemic, and we were just kind of learning about it. To give you a context of the staffing challenges I ran across on March 3rd, I typically have 96 polling places, and each one of them has 4 poll workers. So that adds up to nearly 400 poll workers that we had lined up and trained. We then create a backup list of approximately 40 to 50 backup poll workers, because guess what? On election day, we'll get a call, and it's typically 2 to 3% of our poll workers will call and say, hey, I'm not feeling well, I'm not going to be able to show up, which is fine. That's part of what we planned for. Well, on election day, instead of getting like a 2 to 3% cancellation rate of poll workers, I had a 10% cancellation rate. And my what we would term is the inspectors, which are really the people in charge. They're my more senior poll workers that have been around the block and know how to run elections. My cancellation rate is usually very low, 1 to 2%, 2 to 3 at highest. And instead we had 15% that canceled. It was dramatic. So we were scrambling. Now, fortunately, I was able to recruit people and literally going up to my assessor staff saying, I know you're an assessor staff person, but I only have 2 poll workers at this location. At a minimum, I need 3. Can you run out there and be a poll worker? And they're like, okay, no problem. I'm going to turn off my computer. Where do you need me? But it got that desperate where I was making calls and actually recruiting even students from high schools that the teachers like, hey, do you need them? We'll help be poll workers, and so it was great. We came through it, but it was pretty dire. And it had to do with the pandemic because people got very scared about the pandemic. So of course, the whole pandemic has created safety issues. It's created the need for more outreach. And that's one of the areas I think all of you can help with, is just helping to get the word out that there's still a need. I know and I think, Kathy, were you the one that said that you're helping out with Sacramento County? Yes? Yes, okay. Well, thank you for doing that. And I will share with you, the more you can recruit, your registrar, her name is Courtney. She's fantastic. I'm sure she'll be happy that I'm putting in a plug for those of you who live in Sacramento County, that, the more people you can have be poll workers, the better, because we're always in need of poll workers. So please do get the word out. That's an area we'll talk about more that we need some assistance with. But
Well,
safety, think about it. I'm sorry, Ken. What's that?
my husband is also going to do it. He and I have just requested our applications, and we'll recruit more people.
Great, awesome. Thank you for doing that.
Well,
So the safety, think about now we're dealing with COVID, which now you have to have 6-foot distancing. You're going to have face masks. I'm going to have to deal with the fact that there's going to be people that don't want to wear face masks, and yet I can't disenfranchise them from voting. And this has been a big talk among registrars across the state. And of course, we have to have a game plan, because we're going to try and have a campaign where instead of bring your own bowl, we're going to say bring your own mask. We're going to encourage people to bring your own mask, but we'll have extras there as a backup. But all my staff is going to have masks. They're going to have 6-foot spacing as well, and other shields that we're going to have to put in place. The challenge that we're going to have is there's going to be individuals, I'm sure it's going to happen in Sacramento, that they're just going to refuse to wear a mask. And these face coverings, and we can't turn them away and say you can't vote. We still have to put them into the system. So we're designing a game plan where we're going to have them stand in a different line, because I really don't want them to be standing in a line where everybody else is following the rules as they should, and they're contaminating everybody because they may refuse to keep 6 feet apart. They may refuse to wear a mask. So we're already planning a backup plan to provide still assistance to them, but not have others exposed to their logic, is whatever that may be, and not needing to put other people in jeopardy. So again, outreach, the messaging that we're going to talk about, we need your help with. So let me talk about, yes.
Tamara has a question.
Sure.
Make sure to unmute yourself, Tamara. Tamara, you're muted.
Okay. Thank you. Isn't there county mandate in place where people have to wear masks in public places in Sacramento County? And wouldn't a voter registration building be considered public place?
So correct, but registrars are not going to turn people away from voting. They're just not, because that could turn into, can you imagine on the news, it'll come out saying, voter suppression, they turned away voters. And so you are going to have registrars having to be creative and come up with solutions so that folks can still vote. But you're right, the rules are saying you should be wearing a mask, but let's be candid, there's a lot of people out there that are not.
I'm glad you're prepared.
Yeah, now you have to plan for it. It's unfortunate, but you can't assume everybody's going to behave well. You have to prepare for the worst case scenario in terms of, as I've told my staff, we hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And that's kind
Will
of
you have signs posted out there at least to please wear a mask?
Yes, we're going to have signs. We're actually going to have greeters. They're going to ask people, and we're going to be posting on social media everywhere we can. And I know, Sarah, you're listening to this. Sarah is who's listening in on this conversation is actually with the local paper here. And so I'm sure she's taking notes on this as well. So we really need the help of the media everywhere we can to get the messaging out. And in fact, related to this, because all these changes that we're talking about, we know the Secretary of State is going to be working on messaging with some of the changes, but I'm also partnering with Sacramento County and the surrounding regions of registrars, and we're going to pull our money together to do outreach to have unified messaging for the greater region, so we can hit radio stations and broader spectrum areas to be able to get our messaging out. So hopefully we'll get some traction, but we're doing everything we can. So,
and I'm listening from the perspective of, because Unity of Sacramento is a polling site. And so it'll be interesting how, because my husband is the minister there and, overlooks how they run that there and their own operation every year. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because we're super strict about the mask wearing with the employees and the staff and anybody who enters the building now. So
yeah, and the unique thing that's very true about elections, which is part of what makes it safe, is it's very decentralized. So what people don't realize is, even though there are state laws that we have to follow, as some of the changes that we're about to say, how things are actually implemented in that wheel that I showed you, a lot of those pieces are at the discretion of a registrar to be able to figure out how to best manage that. Identifying where are those locations, like your locations at the church, right? So that's a good location because I've identified it for the community and it's got AD accessibility and you're obviously great to work with. So all these are reasons that they have identified your location as a location. And I can tell you right now, in talking to Courtney, they lost nearly 50% of their sites because of COVID for November. So they're still scrambling for sites. So pretty significant. But if you have contacts in the community to identify sites, please do share them with the registrar's office there in Sacramento. So let me go and highlight some of the key things that happened. So in the executive order, it's called Executive Order 6420, N6420. And then there was a Berman bill that was recently chaptered that codified that decision. What it is allowing is for us to give every active registered voter in California a vote by mail ballot and to have the postage paid. Because in some places before this, it was voluntary in terms of each county if they had to actually pay for postage or not. The problem, that's the challenge, of course, for local elected officials is we really want everybody to be able to mail it in, but there's a cost and that burden comes to us. So it's typical that the state may direct us to do something, but not necessarily give us the funding to do it. So that ends up falling onto the county to absorb that cost. But it is important because with the ability to have a vote by mail option and have the postage paid, it will allow people to avoid having to come into the vote centers if they don't want to. So that's really critical. And that's one of the messaging that we're talking about. How do we share that everybody who is on our registration voter roll should be, will be getting a vote by mail, and to encourage them to do that. We want to make sure we do have a 15-day prior cutoff, because we have to be able to get it into the mail to them in time. But we really want people to sign up and do their registration if they want to change their registration even before that. And so we want to encourage people to do it actually 29 days before if they're able to, because that makes our life a little easier. So again, the vote by mail will allow people to vote from home and avoid the lines in the voting center. So, so let me share with you, this is one of the things I want you all to kind of learn from this, because the question is, does the vote by mail work? What are the precautions that are taken to protect against voter fraud? You'd be surprised how much I'm asked that every single presentation. What about voter fraud? But how do you maintain not disenfranchising voters? And then how does this thing called vote by mail differ from absentee ballot voting? So let me go through that. First of all, the vote by mail process, every time you get your envelope, let's walk through it. You'll get your envelope and you open it up. You'll have another envelope inside. You'll have your ballot. You actually cast your votes. You'll put that ballot inside that envelope, and then you'll be asked to sign the envelope with your signature. When that system comes in, we will, and you'll be able to sign up, by the way, some of the new things that are being offered across the state is you'll be able to do something called ballot tracking, which means you'll be able to track your ballot through the system so that you'll see when it arrives to us and our processing of it. So that's helpful. And I think there's also something called informed delivery that you can do with the post office, that if you want all of your mail to know what it is through their system, because that's a little bit of a labyrinth, you can sign up for that and you can even track it through them. So there's a couple of options for you, but the ballot track is a pretty nice little addition. That's the one we're doing here in Yolo County. Other counties are using a different vendor, but most of the county is using ballot tracks. So again, you can track it. And the signature that you put on that envelope, in Yolo County, we have this machine. We call it the Agilis machine. That's the nickname of it, of this machine. It actually goes through and scans all the envelopes and gets a digital image, and it pops it up and makes it available in our system. Then my workers can go into the database that has all your signatures from the DMV, anything that you've signed, a voter registration card. We have a historical signature that goes back up to 4 signatures of examples of your signature that we have in the database. We can compare that signature to what just got scanned in. And the system itself, the Agilis system, has got artificial intelligence, because if it's a perfect match, it's done. They know it's you. If there's a difference that exists between the Agilis scanned image and your the image that's in our database, it gets then put into a separate pot of ballots that my staff actually goes through individually and does a side-by-side comparison. So now you have a human element that's actually comparing the signatures. And everybody who's done that has had training to be able to do the comparison signature verification. And then if they're not sure and they're not sure it quite matches and they're going to reject it, before they can reject it, they pass it on to a manager. And a manager then reviews it and either says, no, this is a signature, this is why, and they'll explain to the staff person because they've had more experience. But if for chance the signature does not match, or the envelope for some reason doesn't even have a signature, it gets put into a different pile, and then we put out information. We look up the individual voter and we send them a cure letter, which is saying, hey, this signature doesn't match, or your envelope did not have a signature. And we send them the form, because then they sign under penalty of perjury. Oh, sorry, here's my signature. We get it back. We now have something to compare to. And we can say, okay, you are who you are. If they come back and they still doesn't match, we say, hey, there's a problem here. These don't match. And they don't see what we see in terms of the database, they should be able to match their signature. And sometimes you have a variation of reasons. Sometimes the husband signs the wife's and the wife signs the husband's. There's all kinds of strange things that happen. So we tell them, okay, you got to get it right, and we have to be able to compare the signatures. But we have this process, but we reach out to these voters that have an issue. And we have an additional 2 to 3 days to do that process, which is important because that's another reason why there's a delay in the election certification process. So does it work? Absolutely. Is it, I would actually even say, because these signatures and these verifications are so extensive, yeah, it may be even more secure than the other way of voting, because somebody else could come in and try and pull it off, but the signatures are the signatures. We're checking those signatures, right? And we're doing it for the vote by mail. So it's very secure, and people do not, I mean, that's why you hear in the news, yeah, there's not broad voter fraud. That is not, it's not broad-based. It's not an issue related to vote by mail. So then the other question is, Jesse, what is the difference between vote by mail and absentee ballot voting? Can you see that? Those are zeros. There's nothing, there's nothing different. So it used to be called, vote by mail used to be called absentee ballot voting. But it was meant for people who, if they're absent, you can vote this way. The difference is vote by mail people could be leaving, they could be leaving the country, they could be going on vacation and they want to vote by mail, or they just don't want to stand in line. Like I told you, a third of the people just dropped it off on election day and went away, but they wanted to wait till the last day to do it. And that's okay. And then, the reality is when people talk about it, again, the difference is you don't have to be absent to use vote by mail. You can still be at home and using vote by mail and put it in the mail and not necessarily be absent out of town, which is the old model, but it's just a new term. So when you hear others, I won't say who they are, saying that absentee ballot voting is okay and vote by mail is fraudulent, has all these issues, not true. It is not a true statement. And they're one and the same, tomatoes, okay? So with that, yes, Deb.
Actually, Janelle had a question in the chat room.
Okay.
Ask your question.
I was just asking, it was when you were talking about voting and people not wanting to wear masks, would it be possible to vote outside against a wall, like have that same wall set up, but outside?
Brilliant. So yes, I wasn't going to go into that level of detail. So the plan that we have, at least in YOLO, is those who aren't wearing a mask get to vote outside. And those who are wearing the mask, because it's a little safer, you really don't want people who are not wearing masks inside and not adhering to social distancing and physical distancing. So we are looking to figure out a plan of, we're doing site visits as we speak of the locations that we've identified. And we want to make sure we have a place for them to vote, probably under some kind of covering, but outside. Yes, Anita.
Just to verify though, we aren't going to have those little voting things. It's just going to be the box that people put their signed absentee ballot in.
Oh, you're going to have both.
Really? I thought it was all vote by mail.
No, that's the next page that I'll be talking to you.
Okay. Let me not skip anything.
Yeah, no problem. You're one step ahead. But to give you in a context of the executive order and why this isn't a big lift for California, on average, 72% on average across the state use vote by mail already. So it's not that big of a lift. Other states, I just talked to somebody about 2.5 weeks ago from Michigan, important state, and they were so excited because they had a primary in August and 25% of those folks were going to do vote by mail. 25 to 100% is a big jump. We in YOLO, we're at 70%, an extra 30% we can handle, right? So it is going to be a challenge in other locations. But you did a great setup for this. Thank you so much, Anita. Looking at the next executive order, which is the 6720, and there's legislation that's following it to codify this as well, because there's lawsuits out there by certain groups that are not supportive of vote by mail. And so there's a need to codify that the legislature is supportive of this. So we're going to have legislation. But this is why we need to have in-person voting, because you have a need for folks that have the need for same-day registration. They need to be able to have, if they have language issues, because we have to be able to provide assistance. In Yolo County, for example, we have to do provide Chinese, of course, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, and Punjabi. And in Sacramento, a lot more languages. So you have these language requirements you have to meet, and you have to be able to assist people in these different languages. And of course, there's disability, because you wouldn't think about it, but there's people that aren't able to actually vote doing the vote by mail. They have disability challenges that don't allow them, because they're differently abled individuals. They can't use that vehicle for being able to vote, and they need other assistance. And then in general, there's other issues that have popped up that are unique that people have to go in and resolve. So this executive order is requiring us to create these in-person voting options. And so this is where people will have to have a ballot that's printed out just to assist them specifically and be available. So Anita, this answers your question. It's not just going to be a drop-off. You have to have in-person options. And what we have found out is typically low income or people of color, people with disabilities, people with language challenges, those are the people that utilize the in-person options. Okay, so it's important for us to provide that.
So then it wasn't the non-mask wearing folks that believe in vote by mail being fraud that fought for this?
It's a different group altogether.
Okay.
It's a different group, two different groups. But the end result is we do need to have this in person. But you'll see that for every 10,000 registered voters, we have to have one voting location. And so we need to have larger facilities. We're not going to be able to do the garages that were sometimes polling places back in the day. And actually, in Sacramento, your location is one of those larger locations, right? So on average, we try to have a square footage of about 2,500 square feet or larger to be able to handle the spacing that we need. And so here's the other piece of it. Now we're talking just not on election day, but we're talking open 8 hours on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday right before elections, and then all day election from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Before, with the vote centers, they had to be opened up 14 days before. Well, data has shown, and this is the push that we did as registrars, nobody shows up. And it's a waste of resources. And finally, they listened because what people do is they show up the weekend before at most, but really Monday before and then Tuesday, right? So the messaging has to be, let's get people in on weekends if we can, and then that Monday before, so they don't have to be waiting in line on Tuesday. So big change. So for Yolo County, yes, Anita.
So I was on the team at Unity, the direct contact for getting the polling site set up several years in a row. And I was on the team when they instituted the change of the 11 days leading up to election day and all the major changes that happened in that one election.
Right.
And there was a lot of confusion. And of course, on the day, election day, people didn't know certain things and all of that. So with these major changes, and I know that these types of events are really great, what is the main promotion of these big changes? Because that's major to just go from 11 or 14, you said, but I think for our location was 11, and then to 2 or the weekend of.
Yes. So the messaging is coming out at the state level from the Secretary of State's office. It's a unified message statewide. This is going to apply anybody who is doing the voter assistance centers are going to have this model where this is their timeline. So everybody, where before the problem that we had is Yolo County did not do a voter assistance centers in March. So Sacramento's, because we had the smaller polling place model, their messaging was different because they had all these days before where ours was just on election days, right? So there were two different models. So now we have at least uniformity. Anybody who's doing voter assistance centers is going to have this same window of time to vote. So at least statewide, we can have a consistent messaging, which when I told you the registrars locally that are consistent with this, we're going to try and have a unified message as well. So messaging is going to be important. The other messaging is vote by mail, you know. And the last piece, look at underneath, I talked about one drop box per 15,000 registered voters. And that's a combination of, you know, some external drop boxes and internal drop boxes. So the external ones are going to be open 24/7, and people can just drive by and just drop it off. And then the internal ones are inside. So like we're partnering with Rayleigh's and Nugget. We happen to know somebody at Rayleigh's, a good friend of ours, Chelsea Miner, and we're going to have some at Rayleigh's, and we're going to put some inside of Nugget. So it's an essential function. People go to the grocery stores to be able to drop it off on a drop box, so they don't have to go to the actual vote centers. So those are big changes, and we want to be able to deal with those messaging. So yeah, you're right. I need a big time messaging, and that's the next phase that we're going to be working on as we do this. I want to share with you that this gives you an idea of the vote center model. So all those on the left are using the vote center model. El Dorado, Napa, Placer, Sacramento, San Joaquin, Sutter, and Yolo. All of those are going to have a similar messaging. If you go over to the traditional voting model, Colusa, Lake, Solano, and Yuba, they're going to do more just a one-day election. They're not transitioning over. And if you're wondering, well, what's so good about doing the vote center model? You can walk into any of these vote centers. You could be living down by Elk Grove, and you could be downtown and say, I'm not going to make it home in time, and it's 7 o'clock on election day. I'm going to hit traffic, although you don't have traffic right now, but I may not make it back in time. It's 6:30 or 7:30. I may not make it back. What do? You can go to the nearest vote center that's there downtown, and you can just say, hey, here I am. I'm signing in. It'll be able to, the new equipment that we're getting, will be able to print out the ballot that's designated for your residency and give you the right ballot. So very different models, right? So we have to make sure we're clumping our messaging consistent with the voter center model on the left. So this is how you can get involved. I want to encourage you to write your national representatives and encourage ongoing support for the United States Postal Service for the November election. We're going to be dependent on vote by mail. And so, you know, there's talk right now about this, you know, all these, and it's politics right now, raw politics about undermining the Postal Service. They are a critical function, and we want to make sure we support them. I want you to encourage you to help promote and encourage vote by mail voting. Now you know it's safe, secure. You all know you got the ins and outs of how it works now, and that it is reliable, and it'll stop it. There's not fraud that's associated with it. I do want to have you encourage people to register at least 15 days prior to election day. If you can get them at 29, even better. But by 15 days, that's when we cut off our analysis and we start to get ready for people who are going to show up on election day, if they show up by chance at a vote center, and we will have them in the system. Otherwise, they have to register and sign up, and it's a little bit more complicated the closer you get to elections. And they can even do it up to election day, but we want to encourage people, because if they want to be, if they can do it before 15 days prior, we can actually get them their vote by mail in the mail, so they can avoid having to go into a voting center. So we want to encourage people to you know, earlier than better to sign up and register. And then lastly, you want to volunteer to help up with the upcoming election. And I love, Kathy, that you and your husband are signed up to be poll workers. Please just get the word out. You know, if you know people that live in Yolo County, and you don't even have to be in Yolo County. For those of you who live in Sacramento, you want to be a poll worker in Yolo County, you come on over. We'll take you in a heartbeat. We'd love to have you. That's our office's elections office is elections@yolocounty.org. That's our phone number. And I want to also encourage you to stay informed. If you want to learn about how to register, this is where you want to go. You want to check your status, because some people may not realize what their status is, like if they're a non-party preference or whatever party they are, or the fact that some other changes have been made. you can go to that link right there and you can check the status. You can also check, you can actually register to vote at registertovote.ca.gov. And then remember I told you about the ballot tracking? You can do, where's my ballot track at sos.ca.gov and sign up for being ballot tracking. Wonderful service that we're doing. And again, the informed delivery, like I told you about from the US Postal Service, you can track every single thing that comes through the mail from the US Postal Service if you want. So, those options are there. And of course, as you can see on Facebook, my office has not only a Facebook account, they have an Instagram account, they have a Twitter account, and you can just get in touch with us and please sign up and follow us on our account because we have a lot of neat things that are happening. So with that, are there any more questions?
Let's give Jesse a round of applause, everyone. That was absolutely awesome. I'm so glad we had this event. Before I just do a couple closing comments, I do want to open it up to any more questions. But before I do that, I do want to ask the question to everybody who has participated. I did record this, and I think it would be amazing to be able to share it, but I would need to get everybody's buy-in. Because I can turn this into a YouTube link and share it on our page and everywhere. So Jesse, I don't know if that's something that you'd be interested in. I just want to, if there's anybody who opposes, can you please write it in the chat room or raise your hand? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. I think that would be amazing and helpful. Any questions for Jesse or anybody? Yes, Deb.
So I just found out today that Unity of SAC, we're going to be doing like a voter registration push. We just had a meeting today, 2 of us, just to kind of start getting it rolling. So I'm glad you were asking about doing this because I think that if it's okay with you and Jesse, that it would be awesome to use this as part of our training. I mean, it's just chock full of great information. This is awesome. And it's not real long. It's not hard to understand. So if that's okay, I would like to suggest that we use that.
Absolutely. You're more than welcome to use anything I've shared.
Okay. And then I do have...
Michelle, oh, sorry. Michelle, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do, but go ahead. I think Deborah had another question.
Oh, so
yeah.
I was just going to say, and if this is too long, maybe you can point me in the right direction. I don't want to take up everybody's time with this, but one of the things that confuses me around voting in California is the whole, choosing a party, and if you're independent, what ballot do you get? And that has always kind of confused me.
Okay.
I don't think, and I think Democrats and Republicans do it different, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Yes, so that's more of a primary issue. You won't have an issue in the general. But what happens is the primary is not truly an open primary. There are certain parties, the Republican Party being one of them, that's actually, you need to register as a Republican to vote for their presidential candidate. And so that's something people get very confused about. And in fact, because of that, the primary presidential is one of the most complex and difficult elections because people get very upset because there are certain people they expect to see on their ballot. And if they don't clarify that they're with a particular party and register in that particular party, we don't know. We send them a non-party preference type of ballot, and a lot of people are NPP and they just see everybody, but that's not how it works.
Okay, that was just primary then.
Yes, just a primary. You won't see that issue at the general.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I just want to piggyback off that question, if I can.
Janelle, let Michelle get in there.
No, go ahead. If it's connected, go ahead. Because I have a different question.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Janelle.
Hi, thank you, Michelle, so much. I just want to piggyback off that question really quick. If you do want to see all of the people in the general election, what would the designation be?
So no, there is not, that's not that same issue in the general election. You'll see everybody. It's only in the primary where certain parties do limit who can vote for who. So, and that's only in the primary. It does not apply to the general. So you'll be able to vote for a Democrat or a Republican or Green Party, anybody else that you want to in the general. All
So
Thank
those
be
you.
very
options.
careful where you dot
Don't-
that.
As long as they're qualified and they're on the ballot, they have to be qualified to be on the ballot. You should, but people do write-ins. You'd be surprised the write-ins that we get.
All right, now Michelle.
Yeah, thank you. So Jesse, you'll be happy to know that I received my Sacramento County postcard today. So confirming, it said, "Are you ready to vote?" And I'm really excited about ballot tracks. How far in advance do you need to register for ballot tracks, or can you do it actually on election day?
It won't be very helpful on election day. So I would
Okay.
encourage you to do ballot tracks sooner rather than later, because what will happen if you're a vote by mail voter 29 days prior to the election, we call it E-29, which if I recall correctly is October 5th. You'll see a lot of our, most everybody will be sending out their vote by mails in the mail at the U.S. Postal Service out that day. It'll depends on where you're located and how quickly the service is. You'll be getting those vote by mails that week or later in the week. Sometimes it may be a week later, depending on how slow the transition is for the Postal Service. But you really want to be able to, as soon as you have your vote by mail, you want to be able, as soon as you've mailed it back, to be able to do the tracking. So I would recommend that you try and sign up before that October 5th. So when it's coming, you've already signed up, you're in the system, and when your ballot starts to go through the vote by mail process through the different stages that it goes through, even through our offices, you'll see that it's arrived and we're processing it.
Okay. Does that also work for if you put it in the box?
So yes,
Okay.
whether it's, so there's different levels, right? So if you put it in the mailbox, that's where the informed delivery and the postal service is theirs. But if it's a drop box, because there's lots of drop boxes that are going to be available throughout Sacramento, or if you drop it off on election day at the one of the voter centers, once we get it in shop, what the first thing we do is we will scan it. There's a barcode on it. We'll scan it, and what we've done is put in our database that it's now been received. And so the ballot track will tell you, oh, Jesse Shop has received my ballot. Great, it made it from that drop box or wherever you dropped it off into the election office. And then as it's going through its process, you'll be able to say, okay, they've now approved it. Hopefully there's no issues like a signature issue. Then you know we've been going through the process of not only processing it, but getting ready to actually tabulate it and scan it and so forth. But we won't know that it's your particular ballot and how you voted, because we don't know that. We just know the outside of the envelope and that it's being processed.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But how fun. That's going to be fun to follow.
Yeah, you're going to enjoy that. That's a new service that's just coming out. And again, California is way ahead of most states, just so you know. Our processes for vetting and securing the signatures and these ballot tracks and all the things that we have to allow for same-day registration, all of this is pretty advanced. We're pretty fortunate.
And then Tamara had a question.
Yes, hi, Jesse. Did you say that we should be writing our legislatures to show support for the post office?
Yeah, I would write your federal representatives, because right now there is discussions being had, I think, at the federal level on the new stimulus package that's being discussed to be able to support, because it is a federal entity. I think that you have one group that has no money committed to the Postal Service, and another group that has money allotted for it. Again, they've got a lot of work to be done, and I feel good about our situation here in the greater Sacramento region, because West Sacramento is a hub. Their postal department, that's their main hub, is relocated just here in West Sacramento. So we're pretty fortunate. People who are way up north have to have it shipped here before it gets shipped back. So we don't have that issue, so we're fortunate. But I think if you look at it nationally, it's important to know that there are big changes that are going to be happening if there's more vote by mails nationally. And so we want to encourage and support that critical cog that's going to help it be successful moving forward.
So financial support then
Yeah.
from the,
Financial support, because
Okay.
there's discussions being had about providing additional financial support to the Postal Service. And I'm just saying that because they are an important cog. When I see at the national level what's taking place, as I mentioned, Michigan's going from, they're excited to have 25%. And if they go even more, think about that growth and being able to handle that from a workload standpoint.
Thank you. And then Kathy had a question.
Yes. How much time is needed for a volunteer to be prepared to volunteer?
Well, how many hours? So I've projected for all the hours in the training between 50 and 55 hours of work, because you have to not only those 8 hours that I talked about even before the election, you've got to get an hour for setup, an hour for breakdown for each day. And of course, it's a long day on election day because you start at 7 and you end at 8, but be prepared to be there at 6 and maybe go till 10, right? So that's a long day. And then on top of it, they're going to want you to go to training because there's equipment that we're bringing in, like electronic poll books and so forth, that you're going to have to be trained on and how the equipment works. So there's going to probably be a lot of virtual training that we're designing, at least in YOLO, but we're going to try and have some on-hands training as well, because what we learned from some of the mistakes that were had in other counties that didn't have enough hands-on, they wish they'd had more.
And then Janelle has another question.
I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about the plan in place in the event that a ballot track doesn't state that the ballot was received or processed or anything.
So you're saying if a ballot is not processed at all? Is that what
Or
your question?
if it's not processed, or if I'm tracking my ballot, but I can never see that it had gotten processed.
Okay, so hopefully that doesn't ever happen. We're hoping that doesn't mean your ballot gets lost in the mail. Let's hope that doesn't happen. You should definitely contact our office. So the nice thing is if you vote, let's say you vote a few days or even a week early and you put it in the mail and you're not seeing any kind of tracking of it, you should let our office know, because if we have no record of it having been brought in, then what we're able to do is we can actually cancel that ballot in that envelope and issue you a new one. And even to the point where if something happens, but you have to let us know, because otherwise, if it comes through and you try and ask for another one, or you show up at the polling center, then you've committed a crime because you're trying to vote twice, which would never be your intent. So you want to be able to track it. And then if it's still not arriving, you can always contact your registrar and saying, hey, I don't see it. It should have been in your pipeline by now. And then we, as registrars, we can look you up and say, oh yeah, well, we haven't put it in the database yet, but it's here. Or we can say, yeah, we have no record of it. Let's void that one. We'll issue you a new one. If it's too close to the election, then we will likely tell you, you can either come into our office to get one or go to the vote center, and then you'll have to get a new one there and just let them know what your situation is. So there's different options that are available to you. Does that help? Yes. Okay.
Any more questions? All right, let's give Jesse another round of applause. That was amazing. I just want you all to know that's above and beyond his full workday. He did this because he believes that we get to protect our vote. And so thank you so much, Jesse. If you want to stay in touch with Women for Equality, our page is facebook.com/Women for Equality. Please stay active with us. We're looking always to grow our leadership team. So if you want to join us, we're consistently doing amazing events all year. So thank you again for everybody who helped organize this and promote it. And we will send the link out via our email distribution, as well as posted in the event and on our page. So if you're looking for it, and thanks again for all being willing to participate and let that be a resource for so many. Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Anita.
Thank you. Great to see you, Michelle.
Thank
It
you.
was great.
See you, everybody.
Thank you for coming, Michelle. Thank you,
Take
everyone.
care.
I learned a lot.
Well, have a good one, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.